The thought is that people will forgive a broken promise if it's for a good cause. Does this count?
Well, I think that depends on how it's done. I think everyone accepts that for long-term care there is a shortage of money. It's a crisis that government after government has really avoided tackling in recent years. And so I think we'll want to know how that crisis is going to be dealt with rather than simply the amount of money. I think there are two tests that need to be applied really in any welfare reform. Number one, does it actually make it worth saving? In other words, putting money aside for a rainy day, which is a sound principle to operate. And also, does it allow enough money to pass from generation to generation to make saving worthwhile? They're difficult things to get in balance, but I think we'll be looking for that. So there are two issues this week. One is money for the NHS for the backlogged COVID. No one could have prevented the COVID crisis, and obviously that has a knock-on effect on the NHS. On long-term care, I think the emphasis will be on how is that going to be dealt with in the longer term.
Well, those are some of the major questions. How do you think it should be funded?
Well, a number of years ago, I set out along with my colleagues Caroline Spellman and Philip Hammond a plan that would have created a form of insurance that would have allowed people to buy into a scheme that meant that it would cap the amount that they would be charged for care, but there would be a cost taken from their estate once they died. That seemed to me to be a fair balance between allowing money to pass between the generations and protecting taxpayers from excessive costs. So, but there are a number of mechanisms that can be undertaken. We'll wait and see what the government sets out this week. But again, as I say, there are two separate elements to this. One is obvious funding that the NHS may require to catch up, and we all know the pressures that are on the system given the backlog that's built up. But the long-term care issue, this needs to be a proper settlement and not a sticking plaster, because governments have avoided properly dealing with this in the past, and we can't continue to do so.
The Prime Minister, to some extent, is damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. And there have been, as you say, this has been going on for decades, this concern about what to do about social care. I mean, to some extent, do you admire the Prime Minister for saying, look, he promised he was going to sort it, he's got to do that?
Well, absolutely. But of course, damned if you do, damned if you don't is one of the prices you pay for being Prime Minister anyway. So you might as well be blamed for something that's a success. And getting a solution to long-term care is absolutely right. He's correct to make that a priority. There will be necessarily arguments about how that funding is achieved and where it comes from. But I think for many of us, the most important element will be reassurance that this is going to be sorted, that we're not going to have to come back election after election to the same issue, because we'll have put a proper solution in place.
We've now reached the threshold where, Boris Johnson stood on the steps of Downing Street and said, I promise to fix the issue of social care. It would now be just so much more damaging for him to try and dodge this again. It's got to be dealt with now.
I don't think he's got any intention of dodging it. I think he's very determined to ensure that we get a solution put in place. It's not going to be cost-free, but the opinion polls tend to suggest that the public would tolerate a rise in taxation of some form in order to make it work, whether that's combined with other elements on personal contributions for care, a cap on the amount of care. All these things are technical details that will need to be sorted, but the Prime Minister deserves credit for actually being the first Prime Minister to be genuinely, I think, determined to get it fixed.
He's going to face a tough ride, though, isn't he? He's surrounded by other cabinet ministers who just know that this could lose them their seats in the long run.
Well, I think that if we fix the long-term care crisis in this country, the government will get a great deal of credit. But there are not just financial but political consequences to doing what you think is right. But as Mrs. Thatcher used to say, if you want to be popular, go into light entertainment. Politics is the wrong career.